This e-lecture is part of Pearson's Professional Development Series for first-year writing instructors.
Hi, my name is David Joliffe. I'd like to talk with you a little bit today about the process that I use when I'm reading students' papers that have been turned into me. And I use that word reading specifically rather than grading. I know we have to put grades on them, and grades, of course, are one of the most unfortunate consequences of late capitalism, but we do need to grade them. But I like to think, how do I go about reading them first? And the first thing I like to do, of course, when I get a stack of papers from students is I like to be able to read them all the way through from beginning to end without any single pen in my hand at all. I simply like to get the stack of papers and of student papers and then read them. And then when it does come time for me to put some sort of mark on them, I like to use a reading guide, a scoring guide, a rating guide, whatever you'd like to call it. Some people call them rubrics. And I know that on the internet and in various sources there's a number of canned rubrics that you can find and use them, but I've never really found a canned rubric that I like very much. And I always try to create a scoring guide, which is like what I call a rubric, for each assignment that students turn into me that I need to read carefully and put a grade on. And the creation of a scoring guide is not rocket science. It's pretty simple, but it's really helped me as I've gone about doing this work. As I take a look at the assignment that I'm asking students to respond to, I ask myself, what are the student learning goals for this assignment? In other words, as the students work on this assignment, what do I want them to be able to demonstrate that they can do? What do I want them to demonstrate that they have learned in the midst of doing this assignment? So, for example, I might say one might be an assignment where I would ask students to have a complex, rich, robust thesis statement, a thesis statement that is rich enough and robust enough to do justice to a complicated subject matter. In the same assignment, I might want to say I'd like to be able to see how they are using various kinds of evidence to support their points. Let's say I might also want to see, do they have good organizational structure? Do they have transitions and turning points within the paper that are clearly marked? And then finally, I might say, okay, I'm interested in are they writing standard edited English? So for each of those four learning goals, I would say what would be evidence of superior performance, what would be evidence of above average performance, what would be evidence of below average performance, and what would be evidence of performance that shows little or no success. And I would try to write a sentence, so let's say in the case of the student learning goal about the use of evidence, I would write a sentence, here's what I would consider to be superior performance in the use of evidence to support your points. Here's what I would consider to be above average performance in the use of evidence to support your points. Here's what I would consider to be below average performance in the use of evidence to support your points. And here's what I would see would be little or no success in the use of evidence to support your points. I would do that for all four or so of the learning goals. So what I have is essentially a 4, 3, 2, 1 ranking for each of these four learning goals. So as I read the students' papers, I don't necessarily need to mark up in the margins, your use of evidence is good here, your thesis statement is rich, I enjoy that. There's nothing to be stopping me from doing so. If I want to really praise them in the margins, I can. But I try to keep the margins of the students' paper as clean as possible. I don't want to interfere with the students' paper. I don't want to write over the students' work. I want to read the students' work and respond to it. So this response guide enables me to do so. One thing you might notice about this scoring guide is that there's no midpoint. There's no 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and the 3's in the middle. There's no C as the middle grade. It's a 4, 3, 2, 1. What that forces me to do as a reader is to make some quick decisions. Is this upper half or lower half? And not sort of engage in that kind of thinking that a statistician would call regression to the mean, rolling to the middle of the mattress, if you'd like. So it forces me to say, what is really above average about this paper, or where does this paper need to improve? The other thing it says to the students is, here's specifically what you need to do to get your performance on this paper higher. If you want to rethink, in this case, your thesis, here's specifically what you need to do to the thesis so that your thesis will be richer, more robust, more sophisticated. Here's specifically what you need to do with your evidence to make it better. Here's specifically what you need to do with organization and transitions. Here's specifically what you need to do with your use of standard edited English. My experience is that by using a scoring guide like this, I not only reduce the amount of time I use to read student papers, but I really do read them and respond to them rather than grade them. I like to think that this is a paper where the student has tried to communicate something to a group of readers. I am a representative reader in that group, and I'm responding, here is my honest assessment of how you have tried to communicate to me how you've tried to move me, persuade me, inform me, whatever your purpose is. So I've discovered that this is a method of reading students' papers that saves me time and I think gives them a little more legitimate, useful response than a typical marking up of the paper in the margins or an extensive end comment does. Of course, when I'm putting my response to the students' work on this scoring guide, I can do a couple of things. I can choose to weight one category more strongly than the other. So, for example, I might say I'm going to double the number of points I'll give to a good thesis or to the use of evidence. I can actually add comments on the scoring guide beside each category. I've given someone, for example, a 2 on the thesis learning goal. I say, here's specifically my point here. And I can, of course, add a final commentary on the paper where I have the scoring guide. But it's keeping a lot of commentary off the student paper that I don't want to violate. And it's putting the commentary in a place where I think it will be most useful and affirming to students.
For additional e-lectures, visit Pearson's professional development site for first-year writing instructors at www.pearsonhighered.com/compro.